The following is a Cartoonerific Studios presentation.
Welcome to Cartoon Fun, it's Cartoonerific. Yeah! It's Cartoonerific.
Well, welcome to the Cartoonerific Podcast, Classic Animated Cartoons. I am Brian Mitchell, and I am the host. Well, last week on the podcast, we had part 2 of our interview with animator Nancy Beiman. She is back this week, and she's going to be talking about a comic strip that she's been doing. And that looks like a lot of fun. The interview is a lot of fun, and it was a pleasure to have her on the show. So anyway, that's coming up in a few minutes. Jerry Beck was on the program a couple of months back, and he was talking about a special project that he was working on, and he couldn't really talk about it. Of course, now we know what that special project was, and it's Me TV Tunes. And, I've been, kind of here and there on that because I'm like, isn't there like a Cartoon Network and a Boomerang and stuff like that? What's really neat about this channel is Jerry is actually involved with it and the programming as well, I'm sure. And they bring all these cartoons back. I mean, Rocky and Bullwinkle and Woody Woodpecker and, of course, Bugs and Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, the whole Looney Tunes a barrel of fun, and lots of other things too. I think Harvey Tunes are going to be on there, and the list is endless. So I guess this is kind of a dream, to be able to program an entire network of cartoons and have it from all these different studios, as well as Warner Brothers and Hanna-Barbera and MGM. Tom and Jerry's going to be on there. So to me, it seems like a dream project to be working on, and especially for somebody like Jerry Beck. So I think that's really wonderful. And I'm all for it, all behind it. I hope it broadens from where it is now and is offered on many, many different cable systems around the country and hopefully around the world. So we'll see where that goes. I'm sure it's going to have much success because there is a big, big fan base out there for classic animated cartoons. So anyway, we're going to be back in a few moments with our interview with Nancy Beiman, the final part 3, that interview coming up right after this. Don't go away.
You're listening to the Cartoonerific Podcast, Classic Animated Cartoons, with your host animator, Brian Mitchell. And now it's time for our special Cartoonerific guest.
Well, here it is. We went through part 1, which was fun, part 2, and now here is part 3 with animator and comic strip artist now, Miss Nancy Beiman. So please sit back and enjoy.
Not meaning to say Clampett was bad, but he was definitely, shall we say, very on all the time, and that might have been a little wearing.
Yeah.
And Jack also said there were times when I got sick of listening to that Donald Duck voice.
Yeah.
And the Ducky Nash would be off quacking at the anchors or wandering off, and we finally wrote a film with him not in it.
Yeah.
Called Donald's Dream Voice, and that was done so they didn't have to use
Ducky. Yeah.
There's so many great stories behind the films.
Right.
That are sometimes more amusing than the films themselves.
I'm sure. What'd you do after Xander's?
I went to work for Disney's character merchandise, and I was animating for Rick Reinert on Winnie the Pooh and A Day for Eeyore.
Wow. Was that from New York you were doing it? Or?
From New York. Dan and I were both the first remote animators.
Wow.
Dan was the first,
mm-hmm.
and he was doing it. Reinert was happy to ship it to me as well, and he went union with me because I wouldn't work any other way.
Right.
And so I got my benefits. I was working on charming Disney characters, and I was in one of my favorite cities. I was having a nice time.
Wow.
Then we did educational films for Disney Epcot, which one of them has turned up online.
Oh,
And I would dearly love to have another one because I animated something on Donald that people have been waiting for nearly 100 years to have someone say. And it was a science film where Donald is with live actor playing Sir Francis Bacon, the Jacobean scientist.
mhm.
A great big tureen on the table. Donald's wearing a little Elizabethan cap and
Uh-huh.
outfit. Imagine a setup with the chairs like the ones behind me.
Right.
They're facing each other. And the actor takes off the tureen's lid, and there's a great big dead bird on the plate. This is the last track Ducky Nash ever did, and he had this incredible hissing sound.
Mhm.
So I had Donald almost crawling through the back of the chair and then start to bounce up and down in the chair,
Yeah.
doing that arm swing.
Mhm.
And they cut to the actor, who says, "It's a goose, not a duck, Donald." And Donald grabs his little Elizabethan cap and goes, "Cannibal." I am so proud of animating that scene. I would love to see it again.
Wow.
So I may ask Howard Green if he can locate them because they were called. One of them was about careers. If you went into the careers they suggested in 1984, you would have done well.
Yeah.
The film is dated,
Mhm.
technically, but the live action in particular looks very silly.
Yeah.
But the advice was terrific.
Mhm.
And I animated about half of the picture, and I believe it was Manny Perez on the other half. This is again for Reiner.
Right.
Then we did commercials for O.G. Readmore, the original ones for ABC.
Yeah, they're wonderful.
Yeah, the first ones were fun and very fully animated. I didn't do all of them, just like the first two.
Right.
And I did a lot of station breaks for the Disney Channel, including one that
Right.
they used for the tribute to Ducky. I was very happy about that.
Wow.
Where Donald gets a present, opens it up, and stuff comes out of the box.
Right.
And Dave Bennett, the director, would give me one drawing, and I would time it, whatever. And when I had to have Goofy and Pete and Pluto and the three nephews all come out of the box and bounce off Donald's head
Right.
or step on him,
Mhm.
I had no model sheets. So I actually had Frank and Ollie's book on my lap, using that for
Right.
models for the old Pete and Goofy.
That's pretty neat.
It was fun. I enjoyed working with them. Then I went to work for Bill Melendez on Peanuts.
Oh, wow.
And that, Snoopy and his brother Spike, the dogs are a lot of fun, but the kids, no matter who animates them, they always look the same.
Yeah.
Because they have a very formal way of animating them.
Sure.
Gave me mostly Snoopy, and then when they did a show called It's the Girl in the Red Truck, Charlie Brown, I was animating Spike, and I asked, who's the lead? You are. He's never been animated before.
Wow.
Yeah, well, I didn't have the nerve to tell Charles Schultz I was animating his characters when I met him, and I should have.
Yeah.
It's not a very popular show, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And the character doesn't talk. It's the only pantomime character I've ever animated.
Wow.
So
Very neat.
I also then went to work in Germany for Gerhard Hahn.
Mm-hmm.
That's when everything died in the late 80s. It was a big slump in animation in the U.S. And the Germans were hiring. It was Don Martin,
Wow.
Mad Magazine. And okay.
Yeah. That's fun stuff.
Oh, yeah. And I wound up working on a feature for him called Werner,
Mm-hmm.
which is really good.
Yeah.
He knows story and he knows what German audiences like. And it was actually a likable character. I didn't think it would possibly work, but it's like Popeye. You like the little bum.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I went to work in London for Steven Spielberg. Now I'm jumping around mainly because I actually wanted to see the world.
Right.
I left Garrett on very good terms because I didn't leave him in the lurch. I had helped staff his entire studio for him,
Wow.
his feature.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to work on American Tail 2.
Yeah. So the amblimation.
Amblimation. I did a lot of work on Tiger at first, and then I asked for Miss Kitty and got her.
Right.
And had a lot of fun with that because she was a great acting assignment. I liked Amy Irving's voice, even if the dialogue was strange.
Mm-hmm.
And Tanya Mauskowitz, though, she was not a good actress. They did ADR on her.
Right.
So I had to animate her with a bad track. So I didn't sound like a girl. It sounded like a woman.
Right.
So I did her as cute and vulnerable as possible.
Did Madeline Kahn do a voice in that movie?
No, that was Amy Irving.
Amy Irving. Keep
the
thinking.
First Mrs. Spielberg.
Yeah.
And when Mr. Spielberg came with his second wife to the studio,
Mm-hmm.
they asked me to take down all the pictures of Amy Irving from my desk. But Mr. Spielberg came up and said, "Oh, that's Kitty. Amy, my first wife, did the voice. She's great.
Yeah.
So we had nothing to worry about. He was a very nice guy, and he really was interested in what we were doing.
Yeah. Wow. Did you just work on that one picture for them, or?
I was offered a job directing Bugs Bunny in New York, and I took that.
Now, was this involved with Greg Ford?
Yes, Greg Ford offered me a director position, and that's what I really wanted to do.
So it was a small studio over in Rockefeller Center, right?
No, we were in the old film building, which was where the Bray Studios was once located.
Oh, okay.
44th Street and 9th Avenue, Hell's Kitchen.
Right.
Had a fantastic Art Deco lobby, which actually turns up in the backgrounds of Bugs Bunny's Looney Tunes.
Wow.
And otherwise, Warner's didn't pay the staff, so we had to clean the office ourselves. I remember a typewriter catching fire when I was using it.
Oh,
Everything
God.
it was like 40 years old.
Wow.
Editor is using this clattering moviola to do the editing and somehow manages to make it work. Everything we had was antique, including the paint.
Wow.
It was very different.
Yeah.
And I did my best with a minuscule budget. I figured if it's that cheap, let's make it look even cheaper. Because it's taking place where Marvin is actually going to blow up the Earth and he's got a trial on Mars.
Right.
Let's make it look like one of those 50s B movies.
Wow.
Wood film. Only 12 backgrounds were in the picture. I put all the budget into animation.
Wow.
And it was very dialogue heavy, and Greg would not allow any dialogue to be cut. So we had to do a lot of takes with our voice talent, because Bug's voice is hard to do.
Yeah.
And Joe Alasky did Daffy. Beautiful job on Daffy.
Right.
And we even got an all-star cast to play our Martians. At one point, I was doing a recording session out in L.A., and Eric Goldberg comes in and said, "Get in the booth." And I need some people yelling, "Goodbye, goodbye." So I'm there shrieking at the top of my lungs. Greg is doing a bass voice, and Eric's in the middle.
Right.
And that is a direct reference to Laurel and Hardy film where they all go on a picnic. And they never, perfect day, where they never get to the picnic. They never get out of the car.
Right.
Every time they drive away, the neighbor's going, "Goodbye, goodbye, we're going now." So there's a Laurel and Hardy thing right there.
That was very neat.
Oh, they did so much with sound.
Yeah.
And anyway, I keep jumping back to them. I absolutely love those comedies.
Yeah.
Because you love them. Even if they're always mean to Stan, they're like brothers.
Yeah.
They're very, very, you can't think of one without the other.
That's right.
Stan didn't work after all he died.
Yeah.
He could have, but he didn't want to.
He didn't want to.
No.
Yeah, he was basically retired.
Well, he advised a lot of people, and he had a lot of people visit him, but he wrote routines for them, but he never wanted to go out in front of the camera again.
So he was collaborating, I think, with I don't want to say collaborating. He was, I guess, contributing some gags to like Jerry Lewis. And
no, not gags. He had Lewis visit, and so Dick Van Dyke also.
That's right.
Very definitely Dick Van Dyke.
Well, Dick Van Dyke was at his funeral, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. But Van Dyke was definitely Laurel. Would have been great to play Stan. And it's very interesting to see all these influences they have on each other. But as far as animation goes, as getting back to it, now have the opportunity to look through all of film history.
Yeah.
And pick and choose what we want to see. So I introduced people at Pixar to these films, the people who later founded Pixar, and Joe Ranft thanked me for that.
Wow. He was an amazing talent.
He was wonderful, but he was a Cal artist, and he'd come to my dorm room, and I'd be running I had very few films. I'd run Chaplin, Keaton, and Laurel and Hardy.
Right.
And we'd look at how they moved, and he said, "Thank you for introducing me to Buster Keaton."
Wow.
Time was very hard to see those films, and now it's very easy.
Yeah.
But there's such an embarrassment of riches, you have to know where to look. And there's even something called the Silent Comedy Watch Party, which has very rare films. There are comedians that I just fell in love with, including the one who influenced Carol Burnett.
Right. Who was that?
Very definite. Her name was Alice Howell.
Oh, okay.
And she had her own starring company. She looked like a fright. She'd pile her hair up on top of her head like a mop. She would walk like a duck. She was usually playing a scrub woman or a cook.
Right.
She has this wild way of moving. She actually is in early Chaplin films, and you can see this blonde in there giving Chaplin as good as he gets
Right.
and getting knocked down the stairs, and that's her.
Wow.
So, yeah, she's wonderful. There was another one named, Gail Henry, who looks exactly like Olive Oil and was very probably the inspiration for Olive Oil.
Right.
Also had her own starring company, and some of these films are still funny as all get out. They are a riot.
Wow. Wow.
Doing slapstick like the men. And both of them went on to have interesting careers in later life, but they are people I'd never heard of before
Right.
the last decade. Okay, I've got my book, The Rat Factory.
Oh, cool. Let me see it.
It's by J.M. Ryan.
Wow.
It's published in 1971. And my copy, Tony Eastman had an inscribed copy, and he very kindly Xeroxed the drawings of Ricky Rat and Jerky Jack for my copy, and that's my bookmark on the other side with Buster sinking
Wow.
down. But this is Ryan. There's Wade Sampson. That's the name for Walt Disney.
Wow.
So the book is flawed, but still has a lot of very funny things in it, if you know anything about the period.
Mm-hmm.
So he took all the worst possible things that happened at the place and made it standard.
Oh,
The
wow.
bit with the in-betweener having to constantly redo the same scene is absolutely one of the funniest things about animation I ever read.
That's funny. A gentleman who just passed away is a historian, Jim Korkis.
Oh, yeah, Jim was a sweetie guy. I knew him.
Jim was great, and he wrote for a while under the name Wade Simpson.
Oh, by the way, I have something from Jim in this book.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because he gave me the review when I said I'd found a copy. My mom was a librarian. She picked this up on the $1 book table. And Mom never got around to reading it, but she did give it to me.
Mm-hmm.
So here it's actually, no, sorry, this is MK. That's Mark Kausler, not Jim Korkis.
That's
But
okay.
here's the 1971 review of the book. It's a mixed review saying he went over the top.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see the little studio with the rat on the top.
Interesting.
So it's a very hard to find book. But
It's-
if you find it, it's worth a read.
the name on it says it's written by
J.M. Ryan.
J.M. Ryan.
Yeah, it's a pen name. That wasn't his actual name.
Okay.
But
'Cause-
there's a guy named Pilsey who's clearly a caricature of Bill Teitler.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure who some of the here's some of the characters. There's Dizzy Duck, Dirty Dog, and one film called Fumble Goose, and another one called Bibbidi Boo Boo. So yes, parts of it are funny, and parts of it you say, okay, you're trying to do Day of the Locust and you're not succeeding.
Right. Right.
But it is, in fact, Day of the Locust set in an animation studio.
Wow, it's pretty neat.
Yeah.
Pretty neat. There was a TV show called The Duck Factory. I think it was Jim Carrey was in it, and
That was done in New York. That was Drawing Power.
oh
Duck Factory was California, and the best thing about it was Mark Kausler's animation of the titles.
yeah,
When they did Drawing Power, they got the character actor who really looked like a bloodhound. He had a great face. And that was the only actor who actually went and asked. He was in Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Farm.
I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, he actually talked to the animators and asked what to do.
Wow,
So
he was. Didn't he do?
convincing.
He did a lot of commercials, didn't he? We're talking.
Yes, my memory is gone. So,
and it's a not Gifford, right? Jack.
No, it was Zero Mostel, Jack Guilford.
Jack Guilford, yes.
Jack Guilford was perfectly cast as an old-time hangdog animator.
Yeah.
But all the shows about animation studios were kind of stupid. I remember Carrie was just getting started. He plays an in-betweener who takes over the studio, which makes no sense, whatever. Nobody
Right.
ever talked about how
Right.
animation studios were run.
I think Don Messick was in the cast of that. I think
Yeah, well, Carrie went on to better things, but
Right.
the thing is, the best thing about these shows was the animated titles.
yeah.
And I don't know if I could do a story set in an animation studio at one point.
Mhm.
Could do a comic strip about it. It's not that interesting, really.
Yeah,
It would start to swallow its own tail after a while.
that's right.
But the Rat Factory is interesting because it also is Hollywood the 30s.
Mm-hmm.
So it has, from somebody who was there and knows what he's writing about, it is over the top. So you've been warned, but I do recommend it. Just, if you want to take a look and see a highly scurrilous portrayal of the Disney studio of that period.
Oh, I'm going to look out for it and see if I can get a copy of that. What happened after the Warner thing didn't last long, right?
No, that was a 1-year thing, and we knew it.
Right.
And that's when I went out to California. I was in the very early video game industry. It was a platform called CDI.
Mm-hmm.
I was hired by Philips to direct. Again, I wanted to direct.
Right.
And this was a producer, writer team, husband and wife team in a little studio, and they had won several awards for these wonderful games, which were interactive.
Mm-hmm.
It's 1992.
Yeah.
Most of the games were like in the upper right-hand corner of a screen. There was no phone. There was no Nintendo.
Right.
The CDI could do full screen.
Oh, okay.
But it did well with interactive. It was not good for joysticks.
Mm-hmm.
The games then had joysticks. So if you tried to do a shooter, kids were crying because they couldn't play the game.
Right.
Our shows were interactive, and I was hired to direct first a Berenstain Bears picture.
Mm-hmm.
It's Berenstain, actually.
Right.
Then Surf City, which was quite interesting. It was set in a beach town in 1962.
Mm-hmm.
The winning, what do they call them now? They don't call them cutscenes the way we call them then. I directed the cutscenes, and I got all the Warner Brothers people to animate on it.
Wow.
And we were doing it at 10 frames a second and using Amigas to clean up. And I discovered people were scared. Was it second is a second?
Mm-hmm.
Very easy to do fast animation.
Yeah.
On 10 frames because you don't do any in-betweens. You bang your keys right up against each other. The slow stuff was harder.
Mm-hmm.
So, Louie, please stop yowling. That's my cat. So we had songs. I animated Happy Rhonda,
Okay.
storyboarded, designed the characters, animated, and I'm very proud of that. It's very well directed, I think.
Right.
And following what they wanted with the story. And I had match cutting and some nice things going on with the animation at 10 frames a second.
Right.
All that survives of it is a pencil test. There are some cuts of it online.
Okay.
Steve Siegel did computer animation again, we had to clean it up on Amigas, but he's working in, not Maya, the one we used before, Softimage,
mm-hmm.
for I Get Around. He had dancing cars. And he also did a whole pinball sequence for Wouldn't It Be Nice, which is beautiful.
Wow.
And so we had some nice things going on there.
Right.
And they played the scenes in different order. If you played the game in different order, the characters' relationships changed.
Oh, interesting.
This was a totally different way of telling the story.
Right.
And I liked that. And then we went on to do something called The Crayon Factory, which is intact and online.
Wow.
And that one, we got Shari Lewis to do the narration for the main character. It's
Oh, very neat. Very neat.
And yeah, she was one of my heroes as a child.
Yes.
Because growing up in the early 60s, there were no strong, remember what I said about no strong female characters in animation?
Right.
A lamb chop,
Mm-hmm.
snotty little girl who talks back, and she's rude.
Yeah.
And she was really, had a mouth on her.
Right. That's right.
And she was fun, and Shari Lewis was gorgeous and fun and doing all these wonderful things.
Yeah.
So she was really inspirational. And so getting to meet her, sadly, one of the last projects she ever did.
Right.
She comes into the studio because my boss, the supervisor, one of the female producer wanted to hire him.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, "Oh, I grew up watching you on TV." And Shari Lewis goes, "Oh, really?" She did not like to be reminded of that.
Oh, wow.
So I said, "My nieces love your new videos."
Yeah.
That guy, "Oh, I'm not going to do lamb chop." No. Use your own voice. She did the entire track with no retakes.
Wow.
Listening to it now, I think maybe one pickup would have been good, but she was so good, I just didn't have to tell her to do anything.
Right. Wow.
We got the editor, who had a great voice, to play Mr. Penn,
Mm-hmm.
villain of the piece. He was originally he's a big ballpoint pen, and I made a sort of Easter Island face. Now these are simple designs for that 10 frame a second thing.
Yeah.
He had a Yes pen, which is one of those retractables that hops along, and a Pinky the eraser that follows along, mopping up the red ink.
Wow.
Weren't allowed to have red ink. We used black ink. And it's basically, it's quite neat because it's a socialist parable about the robots taking over the factory from the mean old boss who wants to make all the crayons the same color.
Wow. Wow.
And it is a lot of fun. So I can send you the link if you want to see it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The editor had the most hilarious voice. So he did Mr. Penn. And the script was great. Another terrific script. It was Gary Drucker and Rebecca Drucker, and I'm still friends with them. They were just wonderful producers, and I really liked their projects.
Right.
And then Phillips decided to get out of producing content.
Wow.
And so that's when I went to Disney.
Now, what year are we talking about? We're talking about
1993.
Wow.
I am hired on Goofy Movie.
Wow. So were you doing story at that point on there? Or?
Well, yeah, that what happened was they were still in the late stages of pre-production, so I was put onto storyboarding a sequence that had already been done.
Right.
Where Max, I did 2 sequences with Max on the porch talking to Roxanne. The first is when he tries to ask her for a date. Her daddy intervenes.
Right.
And the second is where he has lied to her and has to apologize. That last one I redid for somebody else. Maybe they both were. But I said to Kevin Lima, whom I thought was an excellent director to work with,
yeah.
I said, can I stage this using changing the layout? Go right ahead. So I had Roxanne actually physically separated from Max by a pillar on the porch. And he's got a prop. He's saying, well, I don't know. Why did you make up something like that? Well, I don't know. He's pulling leaves off a flower. She loves me not. I don't know. I just wanted you to like me. And she just does a little take and goes, I already liked you, Max. And he does. And then she comes around that post and she goes, from the minute I heard you laugh, yuck. I animated the entire thing as well.
Wow.
So that's really, they gave me the subtle acting scenes. I would have loved to have stayed with Goofy for the entire picture.
Sure.
But I only animated the opening sequence where he wakes Max up and dances the mambo with him. That whole bit where they told me, you're going to do it in John Sibley style. And they sent me some John Sibley, the Olympic champ and all.
Sure.
God, is that hard act to follow. He had to do that on ones and he had to go straight ahead.
Yeah.
But I'll do my best. You want Sibley? I'll give you Sibley.
Yeah.
And so I can do that. If you say I want the Bob Clampett bugs or I want the Bob McKimson bugs or the Chuck Jones bugs, Greg could ask for it and I'd give it to him. There's differences in the way they move.
Right.
And the proportions differ. But if you tell me you want classic Mickey or you want Goofy John Sibley style, yes, I can do that.
Right. Wow.
When I did my own characters, of course, it was a totally different thing.
Yeah.
The Three Fates originally had much more material, and as their roles kept getting cut down, weren't going to move anywhere. I said, why do they need feet? Can they just be rags with like puppets with hands and faces in there? And John and Ron said, well, I guess so. And so why not? It makes them more interesting.
Yeah.
And
makes them more ghostly.
They were spirits.
Yeah.
And they got in a lot of trouble for putting a little button on Atropos' shroud. And they said, that's not Greek, that's medieval. I said, Susan Nichols has buttons in her reference here, right here. And that actually got argued about. And they finally said, all right, since they're spirits, you can have a button on her shroud. This is how much Disney used to care about research.
Yeah.
And they don't anymore. You take a look at the new film Wish, they didn't research a damn thing.
Yeah.
I can name several others where they didn't, if they did the slightest amount of research on things like what are royals like, what does a king do, who is actually heir to a kingdom, they would have changed stories and very much for the better.
Right.
So
yeah, it's a shame.
Research helps.
It does. I think they, I've seen so many recent Disney films where it doesn't matter if the horse is, it's hand-drawn or it's computer animated. It's basically the same horse, Well,
they're using the same animation. They can do that now.
Yeah.
This is what's scary is if they're only making sequels, that means all they have to do is train AI on their own pictures.
Yeah.
And that means they already have the rigs built and they don't need the animators. Just type in what you want them to do and they'll take the library of movement that's already there and it's perfectly legal.
Yeah.
So congratulations, they finally turned into Hanna-Barbera.
Yeah, exactly.
And frankly, The animation I've seen in the last picture was so incredibly poorly acted.
Yeah.
People filming themselves and they can't act.
Yeah. That's a
You
big,
know, if
that's
you
a big
wanted to be
problem.
an actor, you could get some training and go on stage.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have the training and can't go on stage, don't act your scenes out.
Yeah. It's true.
Never do. I use my hands because they move faster than the rest of my body.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm animating Three Fates or Goofy Dancing with Max,
Mm-hmm.
I can do this movement a lot faster
Right.
using a couple of hands. And what if you're animating a three-headed dragon that weighs 38 pounds and lives underwater?
Mm-hmm.
How about, you can do the movement this way. Ellen Woodbury, when she animated Pegasus, she said she did the horse movement this way.
Sure.
Sure, she surely didn't film herself. She just acted it out. This is what the horse is doing.
Years ago, I was told that I should take up puppetry. That was something I did very young. Until
I love puppets.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love the Muppets, but I love a lot of different. Well, that was going to be my career. I was going to be a puppeteer. I had this in my head because I was doing shows in New York when I was 11, 12 years old, and I was doing competitions. Yeah. And then one
With
day,
puppets?
yeah, with puppets, yeah.
Oh, man.
make my
Did you
own.
ever go to the Bill Baird Theater in Manhattan?
I never got there.
I went there on my birthday, my 7th birthday. My dad took us.
Oh, wow.
It's one of the most magical experiences of my life.
Yeah. Well, his section in Sound of Music with the puppets is pretty magical. And he did some TV specials, which I'd like to unearth,
I loved watching a show out of Philadelphia called Diver Dan, which is turned up on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And it's fish characters and a mermaid, and all took place underwater with a diver character, obviously Diver Dan, but they had a fish smoking a cigarette, triggerfish, and Baron Barracuda.
Right.
And a skeleton that pulled itself together in a pirate ship and danced a hornpipe. I'd never seen anything like that.
Wow, it's amazing.
So, yeah, but if I had known what I know now about how many puppet companies there were, I might have changed careers, but that was another,
It's just
opportunity.
I
love puppets.
Yeah, if you're not Jim Henson or Bill Baird at the time, I think Bill Baird was at the World's Fair. I think he was.
He was. I definitely saw his stuff there too.
The Croft puppets were there. The Sid and Marty Croft were there at the fair.
I can't remember too much. I was about 7 years old. We went in 1965. I remember seeing the Disney Carousel of Progress.
Yes.
And I remember a woman coming on stage in 1900 saying, "Look, dear, it only took me 10 hours to do the laundry. And it's so much better now." And The Small World, which people hated. I adored that ride.
Yeah.
What is so nasty? I mean, it was so magical.
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it.
Mm-hmm.
But I do parody it in a comic strip that's coming up.
Well, that's cool.
No, it's not disrespectful at all.
No, it doesn't have to be.
It's a funny line that my sister gave me. It's actually very funny.
Right.
And I won't give it away, but it's said by an alpaca.
Right. Wow.
And, it's fun putting that little reference. I've had a couple of references to Disney films. They've always been just fun and light.
Cool. Very neat.
Yeah, because why not? A little girl would watch Disney films.
Yeah.
My heroine is 9 years old.
Did you enjoy working on Hercules?
Very much so.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed the Fates. I enjoyed working with Gerald Scarfe. It was a very pleasant project to work on.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of in-jokes in it.
Right.
Every single one of the dead souls is a caricature of someone who worked on the picture. Now, Nick Ranieri and I came up with an ending because they were not sure what to do with Hades. And I said, well, what does Hades hate more than anything? He said, well, being in the underworld.
Mm-hmm.
That's worse than being in the underworld. Being in a small underworld.
Right.
So we boarded this thing where Zeus whacks Hades with a bolt of lightning, puts him down in that jail where the Titans were at the beginning,
right,
with pain and panic, and the water swirls in over him, and Hades yelling, "No!" And then it pulls out, and you're in the Fate's eyeball.
Mm-hmm.
And they're standing there like a couple of stuffed idiots. One of them's picking her nose, another one's scratching herself, and the little one, Atropos, just goes, "Who knew?" We actually animated that, and it got great laughs. And then Michael Eisner says, "I want Hades to fall off a big rock into the river Styx."
Yeah.
Okay, I got that scene. I said, okay, someone's going to do Hades, but I get to do all the ghosts.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to put myself in there.
Yeah.
Could you please give me green eyes? They gave me green everything. I'm the ghost that comes up, gets Hades in a hammerlock, and pulls him over backwards into the river Styx.
Ah, very neat.
But everybody in that, there's one scene which is out of focus, but it's hysterically funny. It's all those dead souls as Hercules is aging. They're deliberately out of focus, but it was given to an animator named Andreas Wessel-Terhorn. We used to call him Little Andreas. And Andreas got bored doing hundreds of still drawings, so he put Barbara Streisand in there. He put Walt Disney in there. He had Jeffrey Katzenberg chained to Michael Eisner.
Oh, my
He
God.
put all these caricatures in, but you can't see any of them.
Right. That's funny.
Yeah, he's a good caricature. He's just wonderful. Things
Wow.
with Disney characters. So there are a lot of other things that they gave me the sexy horse to design. And Ellen was a little upset because she was animating Pegasus. And I said, they're giving it to me because this is two stupid devils turning into a horse.
Right.
And they don't know anything about horses, and I don't either.
Right.
I do, but not as much as you. So they're supposed to be a sort of two dopey devils idea of a sexy horse.
Right.
So I did this big pink thing with a big curly mane and fluffy wings. And the saddle, Ellen looks at it and goes, that's not the way a saddle fastens. I said, it's the way a brassiere fastens. The saddle looks like a box of candy, a Valentine heart. And as she inhales, and the saddle originally hit the floor. And that's the only time I was censored.
Wow.
Because they couldn't have it hit the floor. It
Right.
slides down, but it cuts.
Right.
So this is drooling in the doorway. And it was very funny.
Yeah.
And then, she has a little heart brand on her butt. So what's her name? I said, Cheeky. And John Musker said, absolutely not.
Wow.
Then I did a scene where at the end in Zero to Hero where Marilyn Monroe is in the stars and her skirt blows up.
Right. Right.
That's not in the movie Seven Layer Itch. It's only a still.
Right.
So I had to fake that. And they didn't think we would be able to get away with that. So I did two versions of the scene. I think I animated a rabbit or something.
Right.
I don't remember, but there were two versions of that scene.
Wow.
So Marilyn made it into the pictures, but that's one of the little things I did in addition. Also, the Thebans were fun. I designed the two women and animated quite a few scenes of them around the well complaining.
Right.
And there's a cat that Mike Show designed, a burned man and a cat named Snowball, which is black. And I got all these crowd scenes where they're reacting, and people started to look forward to them.
Wow.
Because I had a cat doing weird things. And at one point, John Musker says, Hercules has just defeated the Hydra. Have them all kiss each other. Say who? So I have the burned man take the cat, give it a big kiss.
Right.
Throw it up in the air, and the cat is coming down on his head with all the claws out as the scene cuts.
Wow.
It's just little things, and you just have fun. It was a fun picture.
Good. Did you just work on that one movie, or did you continue on to something else?
I was on several films that didn't get done the way they were supposed to be. I was originally, after Hercules, I was after Goofy Moo was on Tarzan when it was a television. I designed characters, but then it was taken over to features.
Right.
After Hercules, I went on to a film that was known as Sweating Bullets.
Yes.
Which would have been marvelous the way the directors had envisioned it. There was only one little problem. The original story has cattle drive, and the horses and the cattle all talk to each other, and that's great. They're the main characters, like 101 Dalmatians.
Right.
And there are ghost riders in the sky who want to steal all the cattle and kill them. And there's a little calf named Little Bit who's going to lead them to safety. And I said, well, you know what happens at the end of a cattle drive? And everyone looks at me. I said, well, they're taken to Kansas City, and they're put on a rail, they're put on the boxcars, and they're taken to Chicago, and they're slaughtered.
Yeah.
That means that your heroes and your villains both want the cattle dead. And everyone's looking at me with horror. And I said, but you don't have to change your story at all.
Right.
There's a movie called City Slickers, Billy Crystal.
Right.
If you did it as a dude ranch, where they're all playing cattle drive, and then so the heroes are not going to kill the cattle, it's all done for show.
Right.
But the ghost riders are still serious. You haven't changed your story at all. Just eliminated a slight problem with the ending. You don't want them to go and get killed.
That's right.
That's what research does.
Right.
And of course, it turned into a totally different picture. I wish it had been done that way. It could have been another Bambi.
It was, it became Home on the Range, right?
It did. And I think that I loved what I saw on Sweating Bullets. I thought it could have been a really brilliant picture. And at one point, I actually said, why don't we have Dolly Parton, who's a terrific actress, Loretta Lynn, Conway Twitty, who was still around at the time. All these country and Western stars do voices.
That's a great idea.
Well, the producer said, I don't like country and Western music. And I said, your audience does.
Yeah. Most of America does.
Seriously,
Yeah.
That's one of the few times I really wondered, what are they thinking?
Yeah.
Don't they understand that when they did Pecos Bill, they got some of the Sons of the Pioneers who were hot as fire back then?
That's right.
I used to actually laugh about the woman playing the harmonium or this organ in Blame It on the Samba, and my dad said, "Bite your tongue." That was a big star, and she popularized that organ, and everybody bought it.
Yeah.
That all of these people who we don't really think as big stars now, well, of course, Bing Crosby was, but Disney was getting top musical talent.
They were. On Three Caballeros, they did the same thing.
That's Two Caballeros, of course, was done for political reasons as well as anything else, but it's a lot of fun to watch.
It's one of my
music is beautiful.
Yeah, and it's one of my favorite Disney films for just because of the visuals. It's all Mary Blair and
well, that's where Mary Blair. At Saludos Amigos is where Mary Blair first starts doing South American design, and that permanently changed her art direction style.
Yeah.
But the little train in Saludos Amigos, I think, is just wonderful.
Oh,
on the black background.
Yeah.
The Blame It on the Samba, which is from a much later picture, has actual pattern of the street in Rio de Janeiro.
Yeah.
In the background, those black wavy lines are on the sidewalks down there.
Yeah. Amazing stuff.
Really beautiful work. And it's a lot of fun to look at this.
Yeah.
Fun color, fun design.
Yeah.
And animation should be fun.
Yeah. They're really playing with the medium of animation in these pictures.
Again, it's difficult to say who came first. I do think Warner's is ahead of them on the graphic look.
Right.
Maurice Noble certainly thought so.
Yeah.
But of course, he went to school with Blair. They had the same teachers, but he insisted Warner's was there first. But in the 40s, everyone's going more towards a graphic style.
Yeah.
And Disney goes towards realism in the 50s and 60s, and I think that is actually a mistake.
Yeah. I love the styling of the 40s Disney films. And I love the styling of the Warner's films.
They're gorgeous.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about Warner's is they did treat the characters as a stock company. So the directors could do what they wanted. A Frizz rabbit looks different from a McKimson rabbit, from a Jones rabbit.
Right.
And Jones's rabbit changes as the animation gets lesser. The eyes move more to the front. So later Jones rabbit is a different one from the early Jones.
Right.
So again, I can do any style people told me to. They say, we want this 1954. Okay, we'll do it.
Right.
But there are some that are better than others. My favorite duck model is about 1938.
Yeah.
Donald, the one where Donald has the good angel and the bad angel. That's Donald's better self.
Yeah.
And the one where he has to deliver the package on Friday the 13th. That's a great cartoon and a beautiful duck.
Yeah.
And really, really nice animation, fun to look at.
Yeah. It was a good period for Disney. He
wasn't the only game in town. He had Fleischer, and Fleischer, some of the films from then. Now, Dad's a musician.
Yeah.
He went to see Snow White, and of course, as he saw it as a boy. He sees us, and he's looking at Grumpy playing the organ, saying he's really playing that.
Yeah.
Oh, when he was impressed. It's also happening in the Spinach Overture, Popeye the Sailor.
Yeah.
And Dad watched that too and said, he's playing the piano properly, and this is as good as anything Disney did. And I said, it is.
Yeah, I believe it.
In the mid-30s, Fleischer is better. Then Disney's art classes kick in, and there's no catching.
Yeah.
1934, Fleischer's making better films.
Yeah. I
You
think
have
it was
to watch something like Goddess of Spring and then take a look at the Spinach Overture to see which one's doing better, or A Dream Walking, one of my favorite Popeyes.
Goddess of
Just
Spring is hard to
great
watch. Goddess of Spring is very hard to watch for me.
I ran it on the first day of my gesture drawing classes to tell people this is why you have to learn life drawing, because that's Bill Pike animating that lousy devil.
Yeah.
And the little devils and the little cartoon characters are great.
Mm-hmm.
The minute they try to animate the pretty girl, she's banging her head on the ground. She's really, really badly done.
Yeah.
And Walt at least had the sense to realize he can't possibly make a film with humans if it's looking like that.
Yeah.
And he also directed King Midas, The Golden Touch, which is an
awful cartoon. Yeah.
Now, David Hand wrote his autobiography, and he mentions in that film that Walt took all the top animators for Golden Touch,
right,
and he stuck with the juniors, and he made a film called The Flying Mouse.
And it was so much better.
Which won the Oscar.
Yep.
And meanwhile, Golden Touch ran way over, and Walt had the sense never to direct again.
Right.
But yeah, that was a rehearsal for the Dwarfs, and Goddess of Spring was for Snow White and the Prince, and they all were terrible.
What was
it? They got the drawing classes, and they were required by then.
Wow.
That's why you have to do that. That's why I told my students, this is why you're learning life drawing.
That's right.
Yeah.
How long did you stay at Disney? Did you?
Oh, I worked for them off and on from 1982, you understand.
Right.
So, but I went on staff in 1993, and I left after the car accident in 2000. But I did 2 more films for them. They had a special projects division.
Right.
And I was teaching in Savannah, and I get a call from Ed Wexler,
mm-hmm.
who was directing in the special unit. And they had a story that was written by a child. And the child won a contest, and that we were going to make an animated film. Of course, it would be very cheap.
Mm-hmm.
That's, again, limitation can be an advantage. So it was called Little Angelita.
Well, what is it called?
Little Angelita.
Okay.
And it's about a little girl who lives in Eagle Pass, Texas, and has a voice that is so loud she could break windows. She winds up saving the town from a tsunami.
Oh.
And it was a lot of fun. And then I'm working again, and I get another call. By now, it's 2000. They're going to have Walt's centenary in 2001.
Mm-hmm.
The only celebration they did, and the only film ever set in Japan made at Disney.
Right.
Another child won this contest. It was called The Grievance of a Star Maker. And we did not have time to finish it in time for the centenary and the premiere at Tokyo Disneyland. I'm sweating bullets as I'm setting a film in Japan. I'd better research this.
Yeah.
I had a Japanese friend in New York I said, okay, what does a carpenter wear in Japan? Oh, jeans, puffy jackets. No, historically.
Right.
Well, she told me what they wore, and I put in all the research I could grab. Now I've got the internet, so I'm doing all this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Got the thing boarded in 2 weeks while I had a bad case of flu.
Oh.
I don't know how I did it.
Yeah.
I'm working, of course, teaching at the school at the same time.
Wow.
And faxing it out to California. And the thing was filmed and premiered at Tokyo Disneyland, and I was told the girl was crying, and I said, I hope it was with joy. I would hate to think that she's miserable because of what I've done.
Right.
And they did put it into color, and Ed did a marvelous job using, again, very limited technology, but also beautiful palette.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually was put out on DVD.
Wow.
I'm surprised. I first heard it in Japanese and then got the English translation on DVD years later.
Wow.
So that was my last work for Disney.
Wow.
But we toasted Walt on the anniversary. I think it was in Hamburg at the time.
Yeah.
And I've always had a fondness for the company because I thought it was a class act, and I worked with some marvelous people there.
Mm-hmm.
What it's doing now is not what I was taught.
Right.
They don't apparently want that anymore, and I hope they're happy, but it's not what I enjoy watching. And from what the performance of that last film was, it doesn't look like the audience likes it either.
Right. Yeah, bomb big time. So.
Well, it's because you really do have to have a story.
Yeah.
And it should make a certain amount of sense. And if the person pitching doesn't have that, you get someone who does.
Right.
should not be about the filmmaker. It should be about what's on the screen.
That's right.
So if you say we're going to hire women, well, I'm delighted about that, but hire good ones.
Right.
And you don't hire them because they're women. You hire them because they're good.
That's right.
It's a very slippery slope for me to say that, but I don't have to work in the industry anymore. I'll just say if you're only hiring because of the person being in the demographic you're aiming at, then most likely you might not have the experience level, and you really have to put them with some really good producer who can draw them back and say, this isn't working.
Yeah. Don't hire because of a quota. Hire because the person is qualified.
Well,
Yeah.
You could say so-and-so worked on this and that, and maybe they are, but you can be qualified and then not know what you're doing when you're given $200 million.
Right.
You should maybe do a short film first.
Yeah, I agree.
It was a film that crashed and burned that way. It was developed from a student film. It was called Nine.
Mm-hmm.
And the feature was, shall we say, it needed to have people come in and finish it.
I love hand-drawn animation. I think there's some good computer animation out there.
It was wonderful computer animation.
I tend to not like most of the Disney or Pixar has done some wonderful stuff, but surprisingly, a film that I really liked was Hotel Transylvania because it still felt like a cartoon.
It's cute design, and I also really loved How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah.
DreamWorks.
Yes, that was excellent.
If I was a child, I would have worshipped that movie.
Mm-hmm.
It had genuinely interesting dragon design, great animation.
Right.
And the Kung Fu Panda movie. The first one was a charming film and beautiful design. That's Nicolas Marley.
Right.
Nicolas Marley.
Mm-hmm.
Really fun to look at and a nice story.
Yeah.
I didn't care for Hiccup talking all the time in How to Train Your Dragon, but the film was really good and I enjoyed it. It also used 3D better than any other film that ever did 3D. They actually made you feel like you were riding on a dragon's back.
Yeah.
So as a little kid, I would have worshipped that movie.
Oh, sure. Do you wish that 2D animation came back?
I like good animation. I don't really care how it's done. One of my favorites has always been stop motion.
Right.
I mentioned earlier the Creature Comforts as one of my top films of all time.
Yeah. Absolutely.
It really wouldn't work in any other medium.
Right.
Stop motion sometimes becomes too perfect. One thing I liked about Aardman is they were not interested in perfection.
Mm-hmm.
You saw the finger marks in the clay. It looked like clay.
Yeah.
So they made some great films and they made some that weren't so great.
Right.
But always they're worth looking at for the clay. Like the last Chicken Run film I thought was a poor movie with some really interesting animation in it.
Right.
Easily one of the best animated characters last year was the mad scientist who was kind of a nerd. He was very well done.
Mm-hmm.
Should have been in a better movie.
Yeah.
But it's always fun to look at these things. And Henry Selick's Wendell and Wild was incredible.
Yeah.
Absolutely incredible film. It made Nightmare Before Christmas look primitive by comparison. By the way, I'm in that movie.
As
well, there are only two female characters, and I ain't Sally. I'm shocked.
Wow.
That was, I believe, Joe Ranft caricatured me as I looked when I was at Cal Arts. Obviously, I had a much thinner face.
Right.
And they gave me fangs and frizzed my hair out to the side.
Right.
When I found out, I was surprised. And we were the last person in Hollywood to find that out. And everybody in the film's a caricature.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Chris Buck is the little, Locke, the little devil with the red.
Oh, wow.
But I am shocked. So that film was stunning at the time, but Wendell and Wild was better animated by several orders of magnitude.
Right.
And I really enjoyed the concept. It's just, as always, we have to have a character we want to follow and like.
That's right.
And I'm not sure I like the heroine very much, although she's certainly original.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so much good things in that movie. But I don't know what he's on now, but I enjoyed that one.
What's the most favorite thing you've done? What's the thing that you're really proud of?
Well, I wish I could see that Donald Duck scene again. I'm very fond of that. I loved working on the Peanuts characters. Miss Kitty is probably my strongest acting assignment.
Mm-hmm.
And I enjoyed working on the Fates. I was on Billy Bones on Treasure Planet.
Wow.
And got in my car accident midway through the production.
Wow.
And I managed to do the rest of my scenes before I left.
Right.
Bones was tough. The first dramatic character I had to do.
Mm-hmm.
He's a totally different style than I usually work in. I was working with Patrick McGowan as the boss. Turned out to be one of the most interesting actors I ever met. Certainly the most intelligent.
Yeah.
And having to have Bones die without making it funny.
Right.
So I designed him with gills and a double-edged jaw.
Mm-hmm.
He's a combination dinosaur and a dying sockeye salmon because their jaws get senile.
Yeah.
And turtle. There's turtle in there, but mostly on his hands and back. He's bent over.
Mm-hmm.
Originally standing up, I had him leaning over, and I had to redo the layouts because I said he's got the turning radius of my car.
Right.
He's not going to stand up straight. But Bones breathes through the gills, and when he dies, the gills just close.
Wow.
That's why he has them, so he can die.
Yeah.
You have to design the character to do what you want him to do.
That's right.
The nicest compliment I got on him was from Glenn Keane.
Oh, very neat.
Said, I wish he was in the picture more.
Yeah.
That was nice of him.
What are you working on now? You're talking about a comic strip you're doing, and
Well, yes, I was sitting around in 2022. I got this book called My Life with Charlie Brown,
mm-hmm.
and I just finished reading it. And I also got this really interesting book edited by Chip Kidd called Charles M. Schultz and the Art of Peanuts, which has how he did it.
Wow.
And all this early stuff. It's really interesting. And I had no intention of doing a comic strip, but I was sitting around and suddenly I got this idea. Well, what if I did a family of dogs that have also got a cat?
Mm-hmm.
And it's their daughter, and they talk to the little girl. And I was writing to Lynn Johnston. I've saved all the interviews, all the emails.
Mm-hmm.
And on Christmas Eve, I suddenly get a lineup.
Right.
I had rough sketches before that, but the first one I got was this puppy named Sirius, and Kate came together about. Then I got a complete lineup.
Mm-hmm.
Lynn said, send it to me. And then she said, okay, you got something. Can you write 24 little outlines? Because for comics, you must have the script first.
Mm-hmm.
So I did, and she said, okay, that doesn't work. This works. Don't ever do topical humor. Okay, rewrite that. This joke doesn't. So, and I got something that she liked. She said, draw them up, and then we can send them to my syndicate.
Mm-hmm. So
I drew my first FurBabies comic on January 3rd, 2023.
Wow.
In April, Andrews McNeil optioned it for Go Comics, which is their online site. And it will be 1 year old on June 5th of 2024. And at one point, I didn't think I was going to keep going with it.
Right.
But now the characters are alive. It's like animation. The characters take over.
Mm-hmm.
And I just did a line over because I wouldn't say that. They're talking to you.
Mm-hmm.
So the dialogue is better when you listen. Who would say that? It's more appropriate for her to say it than him.
Right.
He wouldn't say that. So when you start to know who they are,
mm-hmm.
it becomes better. But it's like having a little animated film premiere every single day.
Wow.
And the scary part of being online is that they're talking back to you. The audience can actually comment. It's like a YouTube thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I make a point of answering all the comments because it's a young strip.
Yeah.
And they could tell me you won't get followers until you do that.
Right.
So some of them have actually become like regular commenters, and a lot of them have had expert knowledge of things like therapy dogs.
Wow.
And they gave me information that made my research easier and changed my storylines.
Wow.
So again, it's an interesting new thing.
And
I don't know where it's going to go, but it's definitely been a total. It uses my skills because I use animation methods to do it. I have backgrounds that are separate.
Mm-hmm.
I just did a wanted poster for some capybara.
Wow.
And those were reduced to about 50% and put on a sign that says escaped.
Mm-hmm.
Here's how I thumbnail a comic strip. That's the Sunday that I was working on when you logged in.
Very cool.
And I have a lot of originals, and I can give them as presents or sell them eventually, I suppose. But
Yeah.
I do them in Japanese ink on paper. This is all from the party time where they're celebrating the first anniversary of the strip.
Very neat.
These are for different panels. I just draw them all on one page. So I don't do a comic strip normally because I can't, frankly. I'm not Lynn Johnston. I'm not Charles Schultz.
Right.
And I have no real workspace. I have that table. So I do it animation style, separate characters, separate backgrounds, separate overlays, composite.
Very neat.
The type is my own handwriting, which I type in.
Yeah. Very neat.
I hope. I hope you can look at it and let me know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's what I'm doing now, and I'm enjoying it because of one important difference. My name's on every single piece, and everybody knows who did it.
That's great.
Animation. I introduced myself to a bunch of cartoonists on a Zoom session. I said, well, I've animated Snoopy and Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse and Bugs Bunny and designed my own characters for Disney. Oh, that's nice. And I'm drawing the FurBabies. Oh, you draw the FurBabies. That's the difference between a comic strip and animation. However, animation very definitely paid better.
Yeah.
I'd done this 20 years ago. I wish I had, because it would have been very much what they were looking for.
Right.
And now it's when I got it. That's all. You take it when it comes.
That's right. Well, you never know where it's going to go.
I'm already talking with someone about doing something else with it. We'll see if that develops to anything.
Okay, very cool.
I own it lock, stock, and barrel, which is very different from the old comics days.
Yeah. We're the syndicate.
Online. It's a very fair arrangement where they have the online distribution and I own everything else.
Wow.
That's nice.
It is. It's very neat. It looks great.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you like it. I hope you like it.
Yeah.
Pleasure talking to you. I don't want to take your whole night. Nice.
Well, we got a lot of material. This might be a 3-parter.
Oh, you gewalt. Oh.
It's great. It's all great stuff. It's great. It was great talking with you. I've always admired you for, the work that you've done, because you've been doing a lot of different things. You don't just stay put in one spot. You're kind of everywhere.
I got to travel and see the world. That's what I was wanting to do.
Yeah.
Seamus Culhane had advice in his book. Animation from script to screen.
Yeah.
And I will quote him. He said, if you have a choice of working on, he didn't use this word, but he said, standard stuff in Los Angeles or in Italy, take Italy, because you can go to the Pity Palace on your breaks.
That's right.
And I took his advice.
Yeah. It's good advice, right?
Pity Palace.
I knew John Culhane, who talked about Seamus all the time.
I knew John and Seamus.
Yeah.
And Seamus was a friend.
Yeah.
And John was a real sweetheart.
He was.
He was a very nice guy. He was actually the only person caricatured twice in a Disney film.
That's right. Fantasia 2000.
Because what was supposed to happen is they were going to animate Alexander Woollcott. And Eric Goldberg says, well, I can't do Woollcott. I said, but Eric, I can guarantee you there are no descendants. He was sterilized. He became sterile. He had mumps.
Right.
And he couldn't have children. And Eric said, well, they'll find a cousin or something. Anyhow, we can't use Alexander Woollcott. So John Culhane doesn't care. So we're going to put him in.
Sure.
And so in there, and I did a couple of scenes on John where he's coming through the revolving door with...
oh, that's right.
With Marcia and Fufu the dog getting smashed up against the glass repeatedly. And then there's 5 different musical beats going.
Yeah.
Neither Eric nor I read music, but Eric was putting colored lines in the exposure sheet, and I was hitting the marks.
Wow.
And then she gives him a dirty look, and her hat is going on one beat, and her feet are on another, and he's doing hopscotch. And it's all on a 3-field piece of paper. I had to punch my own animation paper because I'm doing peg overs. That's this stuff nobody in your audience is going to know what I'm talking about. You know what a peg over is.
Right. I do.
They're going from one set of pegs to the other. And I had to do it just so and punch my paper off kilter just to make sure that it was correct and that the in-betweeners had exactly the same punch.
Right.
So we got that done, and it was fun. I also have her being hooked at the end by a crane and hauled out of the scene. I would have loved to have been on that picture longer, but I was not actually supposed to be on it at all.
Right.
Because it was supposed to be taking people from the wreck of what was... Kingdom of the Sun.
Yeah.
Eric asked for me specifically to do the very difficult scenes.
Wow.
I was on it for about a month and then went on to Sweating Bullets.
Right. Wow. Kingdom of
So
the...
I enjoyed working on these different projects. I had good directors on all of them.
Right.
Really only had bad directors in this century.
Yeah.
They've really gone downhill and
Yeah.
getting people who don't have the experience. And so now I can only blame myself. If oh boy, am I the lousiest boss I ever worked for? Hell yeah. And who wrote this stuff? Well, you did. So I'm totally responsible for this comic.
Yeah.
So I'm very pleased when people like it.
Well, great. I'm gonna take a look at it. And
So I hope you enjoy it. And I tried to bring animation back into the comics. There's a lot of movement.
Mhm.
And you'll even hear of Capybara from Brazil saying we need a space. In Brazil, we have a space.
The space.
The people who know will know what that is from.
Okay.
Because I love that movie.
Nancy, thank you for coming on here. I'd like to visit with you in the future, if that's okay.
Oh, and if you're ever in Toronto, please do come by.
I will. Anyway, it was a big pleasure having you on. I'm sure the audience appreciates it as well, and we'll be in touch.
It's a pleasure, Brian. Thank you, and I really am enjoying your podcast. You asked the right questions, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Take care now.
Do you have any questions or comments about the podcast? Please email Brian at cartoonerific.com. Your email may be featured in one of our future shows.
Yes, that's right. We have a chat feature. You can actually click the button on whatever service you're on if they're offering it, and you could send us a little message there, and then we'll get it. So you don't have to do the email. You could just go to like YouTube. There should be some sort of a chat button for the Cartoonerific podcast. If you have any questions or comments or recommendations, you might have an idea for a guest in the future. Just post it there. Or what's really easy, if you're on Facebook, you could just go to our page and subscribe to our page. Just join it. And then what you can do is you can leave a comment there and we'll see it and we'll take everything into consideration. So you got a couple options there. So please do that. I want to thank Nancy Beiman for a wonderful trio of interviews here. And we try to take that one big interview and, break it up so it was bite-sized so you could listen to it on the way to work or wherever you're going. Well, if you're enjoying the podcast, and I hope you are, we have a bunch of great guests coming up in the weeks ahead. If you want to find out about next week's guest, okay, tune into Cartoonerific News. Marjorie hosts that every Tuesday night. And you'll find out who that week's guest is for the Cartoonerific podcast. Please, 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 I know I say this all the time, but if you have some friends out there that are interested in these type of things, cartoon interviews and stuff, please let them know about us. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I don't know what you're waiting for. Just go ahead and go to your favorite service and click on the subscribe button, and you'll always be notified every time a brand new Cartoonerific podcast is uploaded for your listening pleasure. Anyway, I want to thank everybody for tuning in, and we're going to see you again next week, next Friday, for more. And have a great day. Have an excellent week, and we'll see you all again next time. Take care, everybody.
This has been a Cartoonerific Studios presentation.
The Cartoonerific podcast is copyright 2024 by Cartoonerific Studios Incorporated. All rights reserved.